how heavy the structure of sin is or how pervasive it is culturally, we can't use that as an excuse. That might be a mitigating factor, but it cannot be an excuse for what we did. Sins are committed by individuals. They're committed by you and me. I commit sins. Okay? The church does not commit sins. People in the church commit sins. Right? A clinic does not commit sins. The people who work at that clinic commit sins. Right? We can't pin the label. We can say that their structures are there, and they are. And that's the way we kind of know where to start as we're trying to pull the walls down and see how they were built. But we have to remember that it was individuals who sinned. Okay? We even think about the Nuremberg trials after World War II. They're trying all the Nazi war criminals coming in. One of the things they said rather definitively, quote, "Crimes against international law are committed by men, not by abstract entities." End quote. Right? So this isn't even us making this up. This is the world agrees with us on this. They like to forget it when it's convenient. We like to forget it when it's convenient. But we've established long before, and even before the Nuremberg trials, no, crimes and sins are not committed by abstract entities. They are committed by individuals. And those sins have personal consequences and they have social consequences. That's why we distinguish between the two. Now, as we talk about sin, though, we also have to reflect, especially within the light of human dignity, always view it with hope. And the hope of the mercy of God, the forgiveness that He gives to us, and the love that He has that can restore what is broken and what is lost. Right? And we can look at the cross, look at the scars of Jesus. The scars remain, but sin has been washed away by the blood of Christ. I think that's maybe a kind of good analogy, good image to keep in mind, that yes, the scars of Jesus remain from the terrible injustice, the cruelty done, but it washed away your sins and mine. So we can always view these things, our personal sins and our social sins, and our participation in the structures of sins with hope, knowing that God can save us, starting with you and me, and through you and me, perhaps even tearing down the structures of sin that are there. 6th point. I promise we're going to get to the common good eventually. 6th point. This is the last one. The man is a social being, or human beings are social. All right? And this is the kind of tension, and at the risk of super oversimplifying this, you can make an argument that this is one of the dividing parts about Eastern thought and Western thought. Is that in Western thought, kind of like quotation, Western thought, there is more of an accentuation, more of an emphasis placed on the individual. In Eastern thought, there's more of an emphasis placed on the group. Now, sometimes you see this in extreme cases. In America today, and in other parts of the developed West, there is almost a hyper-individualistic approach to things, a hyper-autonomy, to the exclusion of being part of the group, to be the exclusion of recognizing that anything that I do could possibly affect anyone else except me. We've lost that sense of the I and thou. It's just me. Me, and me again. It's hyper-autonomy. That's the extreme version of that. On the other side, you can see this, and what's the constant tragedy that keeps repeating itself over and over again in parts of the Far East? Thousands, millions, tens of millions of people getting trampled. What? For the group, the collective to move forward. And this has repeated itself over and over again in the history of countries in the East. Just like in countries in the West, we keep over and over again repeating this hyper-individualistic autonomy and the kind of chaos that can lead to. So that's where the tension is, because it's both. It is both. We are individuals, but part of a society. That you and I have to remember that we have dignity as individuals, and we cannot forget that dignity or let anyone else forget it. but that it functions within the larger group. We can make an example, actually, we can kind of maybe think of an analogy even with the church, right? In our own faith. You and I have to personally encounter Christ. Someone else cannot be saved for me. I have to personally follow Christ. It's what our Protestant brothers and sisters call having that personal relationship with Jesus. Now, without getting too far afield into the fields of theology here, there is that personal aspect, right? I have to personally encounter the Lord. I have to personally accept the invitation. I have to make that faith my own. But I do so within the context of the church. I don't get to make the rules. I don't get to make up the rules. I don't get to make up... I'm part of a bigger family. I don't get to be like, hey, I'm the newest member of the family, and I'm telling you guys what the rules are in the family. I've known plenty of toddlers who tried to do that. They all failed. Right? You don't get to make the rules when you join the family. You join the family, you buy in or you're out. I haven't known any toddlers who were kicked out, but you get what I'm saying, right? There's the individual relationships, but it works within the context of family, of community, of society. So we're social creatures. We are individuals who operate within society, within community, within family. That's true within our own families, it's true within the church, and then you could say, by extension, it's also true in society, and therefore in governments, and internationally. But it starts with the individual. It starts with the individual leading to the group. Again, we're part of the body of Christ. As Paul said, the hand cannot say to the foot, I don't need you. No, we're in this together. Okay. So those are the 6 things. Unity of the human person, transcendence, unique and unrepeatability-ness of this, the freedom, reality of sin, and finally, human beings as social creatures. All right. So now, about 10 minutes before we were supposed to end, finally, the common good. Really sorry. So what is the common good? Well, Gaudium et Spes, I think it's paragraph 26, but in Gaudium et Spes, it says that the common good is, quote, the sum of total social conditions which allow people, either as groups or individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and more easily. Okay, so it's the total sum, the sum total of all the social conditions which allow you and I to, in the words of Jesus Christ, in John chapter 10, to have life and to live it more abundantly, to live it to the full. That's what the common good is. It is all of these things that we find in society, in a community, that contribute to you and I essentially becoming the best versions of ourselves, to flourishing. St. Irenaeus said, the glory of God is man fully alive. And this kind of piggybacks on that, this idea like the whole point of the common good is that you and I can be fully alive, we can flourish. Now, first and foremost, I want to say that, and I think Jesus was talking about this, I think St. Irenaeus was talking about this, I think the church fathers who spoke on this were mostly talking about the spiritual flourishment, the spiritual goods. That does not mean that we ignore the other ones. But I think it is important to point out that first and foremost they would have been concerned about the spiritual goods and our salvation, for starters. And us finding, living lives according to the call that we have received. And that is how we find the best flourishment. That doesn't mean that we can't also flourish in other ways. And that's what the common good does. It enables us to do that. But even before them, it's like I said, we had Gaudium et Spes, but they got this from the church fathers. There's an older document called the Letter of Barnabas that you can kind of see hints of this in it. That's very old. And actually, if you go back a few hundred years before that, the time of Alexander the Great and maybe before, there's this guy named Aristotle, and he was pretty smart. He wrote about the common good, and he said something very, very similar. This sum total of all the social conditions that allow human beings to flourish. So, a few points to clarify that we should clarify before, on the common good. So first of all, when we say the common good, we are not talking about a checklist of goods, right? So this is not like the common good means everyone has a house, this many square feet with this many bed, and it is not a checklist. Okay, the common good is not just this list of things, goods that we're all trying to accumulate. All right, so that's the first thing. The second thing is the common good, when we're talking about that, when we say the common good, we have to remember that it can change based on the situation that we find ourselves in. Okay, so an example is during wartime. I don't think we did this in the last couple of wars, like the ones in the Middle East and Afghanistan recently, but if we think back, maybe before I was born, you think back to like World War II and the rationing that went on during World War II. Okay, so everyone's recycling rubber and donating it, and we're gonna have sugar rationing and fuel rationing and stuff like this. Okay, well during wartime, for example, the common good might necessitate wartime rationing. You guys have no one gets sugar, or you only get X amount of sugar, or there's only so much fuel that you're allowed to have from this time, for each month. Okay? So during a wartime, we're doing wartime rationing. Maybe the common good says, no, we need the sugar for these other things. We need the fuel for this. Like, we can't let people consume as much as they usually would. And that's in the common good. That's in the best interest of everyone. Ultimately, it will lead to the most, I would say the most, that's, gotta be careful with that. It will lead to the society flourishing, right? Because what will not lead to the society flourishing is losing the war and being conquered, right? So it will lead to the society needs to ration sugar and fuel and rubber and all these other things to flourish. Hopefully when the war comes to a swift conclusion. If in peacetime and in time of plenty, I am not allowed to buy sugar because someone else is hoarding it, now that's no longer in the common good. Now we have an issue of justice, or rather injustice, that needs to be addressed. Right? So the circumstances can affect what the common good is and what it looks like. So that's another important thing. We have to say that the situation can change. Right? The same rationing that's acceptable during wartime is not acceptable during peacetime, especially if the reason is someone else is being a greedy miser and hoarding all of it, or is using that to kind of accumulate a giant fortune for themselves, right? Or worse, is giving it to that country's enemy on the black market. I mean, there's a whole list of things you could say that, like, oh, that's terrible for the common good. Third thing, when we talk about the common good, we can't, and this goes back to what we were just finishing on about man being social, we cannot deny the individual, all right? So it goes both ways. Remember, when I think about my dignity as an individual, I have to remember that it's within the context of family, of community, of society. But going back the other way, when we talk about the common good, I can't deny the individual, all right? I can't merely look at a whole group and force everyone else to conform. Right? That is not common good. That is false utopia. By the way, a little side note. Have you guys ever noticed anytime anyone's tried to start a utopia, it's always failed miserably? You know why? Because utopia is not seeking the common good. Utopia is seeking total confirmation, not confirmation. Everyone conforming to one thing, one idea, one belief. Well, good luck trying to get that. So what are you going to run into? You're going to run into people who will refuse to conform to whatever that is, and now what do? Oh, well, that's what gulags and concentration camps are for. That's what the killing fields in Cambodia are for. Because everyone isn't conforming to this. That is not the common good. That is false utopia. Every utopia is always a false utopia because there's going to be a group of people that doesn't conform. It's usually the Jews and the Christians. Well, at least the Jews. We can be we can be weak sauce about that sometimes, but give credit where credit's due. Our Jewish brothers and sisters do not bend in the face of false utopia. And they never have. There's a reason the Nazis went after them. There's a reason that Tsarist Russia targeted them in the pogroms. They're the ones who don't conform. I say that to their credit. We could learn something from that. Not conform to the culture when everyone else is telling us we need to think a certain thing or believe a certain thing or act a certain way. I even heard, I don't remember where I heard the quote, but someone said once, the reason why utopia will never work is because people will keep running into the Jews. His point was